Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. I feel very, very lucky. Thank you, Wyatt, for making the famous call that we all wait for, hope for, and the wonderful staff. They're always it's so great to see people I've known now for 8 years, and my wonderful colleagues. The people I've taught with, and Alan Wire last year, and Tim O'Brien this year. It's great, and some of my female drinking buddies. Thank you. I have to say, I really do like that new bar with with the margaritas are out of sight. They're great. And some of us need them. I'm going to start tonight reading 3 very short stories from a new collection of stories called Pure Hollywood. That's a novella. I read a part of that 2 years ago. And these are a part of this new book. And they are, as I say, short. I'm going to start with this one. Where You Live When You Need Me. Out of nowhere, Ella, a mound with no known address, a swaying mystery, swollen hands, swollen feet. Did she sleep in the playground? Ella simply appeared. No phone, but a tiny notepad, a tiny pencil. Where you live when you need me. Like the Mr. Softy sound, Ella drew children to her under the shawl of her arms. Ella was a house in the park for an afternoon that often faded into later. No trouble, any time, where you live when you need me. She wasn't a bargain, but she was worth every penny. Besides, Anne Byrne, who first used Ella, said the woman spent her money on treats for the children. How else to explain the matchbook trucks I found in my son's pockets? Ella? I like it. They're happy. Me too. But you need the money. That was the summer when little parts of little bodies turned up in buckets and dumpsters in the Bronx. The summer of 1984, weeks of record heat and brown air, colonies of plague ugly rats partied under park benches, hauling off big fines, pretzels and buns, acting bold. Ella watched the children by the playground sprinklers, then picnicked in the park when the sun was down and the grass blue, the rats less visible. I saw Ella sometimes in the North Meadow, a squat teepee circled by the Byrne boys chasing the little Fleming girl with squirt guns, getting sopped. For a while, we fretted over losing Ella to the Flemings. Everyone shared Ella. She had work every day if she wanted. No, Ella said, I don't leave. Then agreed to 2 weeks in July with the Flemings in Nantucket, even though by her own admission she couldn't swim. Ella brought out something in the mothers I knew, brought out something in me so that we, all of us recklessly employed someone about whom we knew next to nothing in a summer when the streets at night looked greasy and baby body parts were being found in KFC buckets. No one who hired Ella that summer ever knew with any certainty her last name, let alone her address. Even the efficient Anne Byrne was unsure. Ella asked to be paid, and we paid her in cash. Anne Byrne probably did know Ella's last name, but she was gutting an apartment on 5th, taking out walls, putting in new windows, and she was living in the apartment at the same time with 2 boys, 5 and 2-ish, which, when I think about it now, was clearly unsafe. The barricades were useless. The boys ducked under. I see her youngest now toddling toward an open window. What a summer. A third and last reported bucket was found in a dumpster downtown off Bowery. As with the other bodies, the head was gone. Oddly, no report of a missing baby was ever made in any borough. Maybe the children were from out of state? I came home later than planned one night and found Ella sitting in the summer dark, which was not so dark I couldn't see her, but I wondered that not a light was on. She sat monumentally boulder-like, but alive, hands as big as soup bowls stacked in her lap. Something else. At the end of the season, I stood on a slimy ledge of a waterfall with my younger son when he stepped out, and I grabbed his bib overalls just in time. What were we standing on? Why were we there? We were in the Berkshires, renting a house on a small, muddy lake is all I remember. That and the sound of water and its tinkly music over and over. I believed in God back then, too, and nobody knows where he comes from. This next, as I say, they're short, is called Family Man. Tonight, on the shore of a low lake in a low spot in the Kettle Moraine, black water, churchy trees, Moss thinks of his wife as a wavy shape, the deflated breasts no more than afterthoughts, whereas Grace, their daughter Grace, is rounded everywhere, long hair slung over one shoulder, bare ear cocked close to whatever her mother is saying to her. Then Grace is standing next to him. With the slightest attention, he has charmed her away from the furious conversation she was having with his wife, her mother, to walk with him. She talks in a small voice without showing her teeth. Moss moves closer to hear. It may be the way she uses her lips, her tight lips, but he can't hear her and bends close to ask, has she ever been in love? When his wife rushes up from behind. So Moss leaves the women and turns back to the house. The next morning, he puts a bolt in a birch tree, and it bleeds. Theirs, a country quiet life, satisfying, or should be. His daughter hoped something would happen, and it did in the shape of a man, blued in symbols that crinkled when he tensed his arms. Moss watched shapes rustle on the man and saw, too, his wrist was wreathed royal, and he was not young. He was ready to inherit. Opalescent is too romantic a word to describe what the sky is doing. From the picture window, Moss follows winter colors, whites, slates, steely skies, and yellows. He puts his hand out to the show and feels the cool glass against his palm and is steadied by the sensation. His lovely, boxed life. Snow falling outside. Very pretty. While he stands inside, well and warm, entirely comfortable in comfortable shoes. The past sleds behind him. Door County, 1951, poking raw squirrel over smoky coals, washing the meal down with whiskey. Scant comforts. Even indoors, the scratchy camp blankets felt wet. He was most often cold. Early morning, hooping into Lake Michigan, then gibbering back to a tasteless breakfast of something gluey they ate with a spoon. No cream to cut his coffee. No cushions for the austere chairs on which they sat, Moss, butt-numbed and dumb. 1951, the year he met his wife. He hears his name, but has no desire to know how he might be described in future. A glass of water, a flavorless man, at best, on a white tablecloth, a goblet of melted ice with the slightest curl of lemon in it. Through the blinds, a blade of sunlight cuts the glass in half and shows up dust. This next, ever cheerful, is called Burst Pods, Gone by Tangled Aster. Young as they appear to be, the house painters have daughters old enough to complain about, which they do to each other across an expanse of a few feet on ladders at the south-facing second-story windows of the house. From the start, Peg has stayed in the house and watched from different windows as the boys have painted. She just hopes Pat Farkey keeps sending these boys. She can barely say hello to the house painters, so abashed is she by their hearty sweetness and the lives she imagines for them. Peg talks to the kitchen chairs. She's doped, of course, but the furniture is company. The young house painters lean against their... I love this audience. You're so... You think you're reading just the grimmest stuff, but people are so kind, and they laugh. So thank you. That's a surprise. She talks to the kitchen. Doped, of course, but the furniture is company. The young house painters lean against their truck and smoke. Smoking. She did that once. Her husband, Anders, watches the boys smoke, says something, makes them smile, or are they grimacing a little? Has he cornered them or asked something off-color, personal? You getting any? That sort of thing. She's heard his coarse approximations of street talk, young talk. She's heard him ask girls, you ever been in love? Anders did the Rite Aid business today and, no surprise, got to talking with the pharmacist, Stephanie. He likes Stephanie. Girls open as a penny, he says. True, but Peg can hardly face her. Stephanie was the one to fill their daughter's last, newest, failed prescription, the inflating and idiot-making pill that turned the girl into a parade balloon in need of handlers, chiefly her mother, the ones that made her quiet, helped her sleep, helped her wake, one a day, twice a day with meals. Who doses her at Medfield? Peg doesn't know. They're not allowed to see her. The doctors think it best. There's nothing much to talk about over lunch, but Pat Farkey's painters, and yes, as far as Anders is concerned, they are the best on the peninsula. Yes, he is happy with the job so far. Anders catches the door before it slams, and it seems he might say more, but what she halfway hears is Anders calling, Ridge? Raj? Reg? What is it? She looks out the window over the sink and sees Ridge as the one in a pirate scarf and a squat painting the railing. Okay. And hearing Anders, the boy springs up on ropey haunches, nods in greeting. She turns a knife in her hands and looks hard at this Ridge, and then through the boy to the woods again and their neighbor's field of barren stalks and burst pods gone by, tangled aster. She thumbs the blade, then uses the knife to skin the watery scum off the blackened breadboard, scrapes strings and stems into the compost bag, potato peels from dinner's burger pie. My God, they do go on eating and eating. Maybe she's pushing for earlier meals to make the days pass faster. Your disappointments are mine. She had said this to Andy, to her daughter, Andy, in her boneless body, short neck, soft chin, moon face, smally featured. What was a mother to make of such a face, really? say, "It's much like mine"? Peg knew the horrors of undressing, the crimped grooves of waistbands and camel-toed panties. A boy in school told Andy she looked like a muffin top, which Andy took at first to mean a good thing, until her brother Carl told her, "It's your gut hanging over your jeans." What was the matter with him? Hurts, prickly, hive-like bites, little poisons Peg can't scratch out. Maybe it's the moles on your face make you look old, Mom. And the boy had said worse, but she didn't always remember. They call Andy a gunt, he'd said. She doesn't want to remember Gunt, but the hamburger graze in the pan and gut, cunt, Gunt, and the memory of Carl's mouth, new beard, raw skin is upended by Carl himself, loudly arrived. "Hi, Mom." And behind him, his girlfriend, Leanne, both smiling as if they like her, as if they come by every day and are expected. "Dad invited us. He didn't tell me." Anders points out the brushwork on the porch rail, skinny spindles. "Come out and look." The name Farky is on his lips, though it's the kid, Ridge, that house painter who's done the work, Anders praises. Peg watches Carl and Anders and Leanne as they look up at the spindles and the scrolled eaves on the house, this old farmhouse, once 100 years ago, a tea house for the quarry down the road. A plaque near the front door reads, "Fern Cottage, 1888. The name is Anders' invention, a dainty tea-like name and a nod to the ostrich ferns that thrive in the dark borders of the lower garden. What is Anders saying to these unexpected guests so that now Peg has to double up on potatoes and cut limp carrots for a side dish to a stretched thin dinner of gray burger pie? The business makes her angry, even as she urges unsalted saltines and low-fat cheese, and when Leanne reaches her loose, inky arms, Peg sees numbers and initials, an excuse for petals, droopy, not so sad, really smeary. Now, for instance, Carl is talking about auto body parts online, alternators or motor mounts, belts, something he can get for cheap. "I want a Jaguar," Leanne says. Huh. Carl, who has been listening for anything Leanne might say, takes up with Anders again about a Corvette he could fix, if Dad lends you money. "No, Mom. Fixing cars," she says, "costs money. I'm thinking about Hardy's car." I said, "Fixing car, you deaf? I'm talking about Hardy's car, what he needs to fix it. I could fix it. I could make some money fixing it, Peg." "Don't call me Peg." "Well, whoever you are, everything doesn't have to do with money." "I'm not saying. That's all you've said. All you ever say is how much the painting's costing, and how Farky's never here but lets his kids do the work, kids younger than me. I should be doing the painting, right?" "Nothing to fight about now," Anders says. "I didn't expect you for dinner tonight. Your father didn't tell me. I didn't invite you or your girlfriend." She says, "I like the house painters. They have children. They're married. Yeah, real grown up, I bet, and living happily ever after, blah, blah." "You want to pick a fight, Carl?" "Peg, please. This is why I hate coming here." Carl pushes away from the table and Peg makes for the boy, grabs at his shirt. "Don't you think you're a little old for a teenager, Carl?" Leanne, the teenager, looks to what Carl does and follows him out, saying nothing as Carl talks loudly about Peg, the bitch. Is it any wonder Dad wants company? Carl turned 37 last March, very quietly at the kitchen table over double trouble chocolate cupcakes Peg has made for him for almost as many years. The girlfriend was missing, but Carl had seemed happy to her then. Maybe not to her husband Anders, no, maybe not as happy as the house painters, but celebrating in a house with a ghost for company, what could they expect? Not much. His nights, his days, his progress in the tech course, she doesn't ask, Carl doesn't report. He has an apartment. Anders helps with the rent because Carl's only part-time at the dry cleaner. He's otherwise, or says he is otherwise, taking mechanic courses at Ramapo. Peg makes the double trouble cupcakes for herself as much as for him. A bowl licker, a spatula sucker. She doesn't stint on sugar, and it shows. Even though the boy ate most of them, she hasn't beaten the eat healthy drum very loudly. Doesn't mention weight. Sleeveless dresses still chafe her arms, and underwear yanks up her crack and hurts so that she stands still or moves hardly at all. One year, the boy wanted cherry pie a la mode, and Peg made both, the pie and the double trouble cupcakes. Today, she is barefoot in what Anders calls her farmer pants, bib overalls, softly comfortable, but loose as an old slipcover. And she is saddened to think she looks like a sofa. Except that now she has no daughter to complain about. Once, but no more. Every time Peg looks at her right hand, she sees another kinked or swollen part visit her. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. You have no idea. It's in the air. Even when I know a lot of us were making our journeys here, how much we miss Claudia Emerson and Mark Strand. And today, when Alan was talking about books and reading and poets and teachers and so forth, I was reminded just of how important they are, how they are still very much with us. And I wanted to read some sections first from Florida that have to do with books and reading, and particularly an English teacher who was very, very important to me. This is in a section called Mr. Early. Mother had used overcooked bacon for a bookmark or a hairpin. Good. It's great. This is great. This is just not what you expect. You think you're going to cry after all this is over, you know? Stick of gum, sucker stick, twig, whatever was at hand. Her books were paperbacks, she said, and it didn't matter how the water swelled pages, fanned, dried, stuck together. Paperbacks, she always said, a great invention. I read the way my mother did. I was impatient. I cut the uncut pages in my Uncle Billy's fancy books, sets of Tarkington and Conrad, with my finger for a knife, until found out Uncle Billy took away my ragged Bleak House. At Uncle Billy's, I learned to read behind the curtains and the guest room's dresser skirt, but I could wander anywhere at Nona's and read books. The Orphan's Consolation. That head I see now, has it other furniture within? I wanted my own Mr. Rochester and found him in the shape of Mr. Early, high school English, last 2 years. By 17, I had guessed that the really great loneliness of James's governess might account for the ghost on the other side of the lake. If the head was a room, I wanted mine cluttered, stuffed, Victorian style. I wanted Mr. Early's praise, but the rebuking length of Mr. Early's sentences and the speed with which he delivered them often left me dumb and angry, and the only assuagement was he spit. Pinball body, angry nose, and bald spot. Mr. Early was a class joke except for what he said when he spoke. Then the dwarfing capaciousness of his complex speech and the seriousness of his sentiments made us quiet. Once, bending to where I sat, shaking my hand out of cramp, he rolled my pen into the pencil groove, stroked my arm, and spoke, "Dear Alice, you don't have to tell the whole story." Yet I wanted him to know how well I knew the story, better than anyone else, because I was not like anyone else, but special, inward, informed. I wanted to say, I have seen such things. Days when from nowhere unappeasable punishing sadness kept me at the big house and my name in the roll went unanswered. Mr. Early sometimes called to see how I was. "We could have used you today. We needed you. You feeling better?" "Yes," from Mr. Early. "Good point, well put, exactly. I got this subject right." Mr. Early was excited, and I was responsible for his delight, and I kept him at his desk asking, "What do you think about?" and "What do you think about?" And Mr. Early said, "You tell me." You bring back how the red-winged blackbird shrieked. Mr. Early gave me the poems by the poet with the goofy name W.D. Snodgrass, whose affection for his daughter made me sad. Once I told Mr. Early that my father had wanted to be a poet, and Mr. Early said, "That's where you get it from." "All the more reason you should," he said, by which he meant I had to do for my father what he could not now do for himself. "I don't know," I said. "Yes, I don't. You do." Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is my father. His book-plated books show my father had affection for bullying poets, hairy, bearish, mad. The poet found naked on the road with arms outspread, declaiming Milton and stopping cars. This poet's books in hardcover and paperback and his collected prose and a biography and books of criticism took up an entire shelf. But what did my father think about? I once knew what my mother thought about. She thought about expensive things and ownership, uselessness, loss. She had talked about the dead and was not afraid of dying because she believed she would join them, her mother and father and those great-greats unmet. Whenever mother spoke of her dead, and she once spoke of them often, I saw drifts of sheer hankies brushing against each other and so talking. Mother then had no plans for her body. "You pick a place, Alice. Scatter me. That'll be fine," she said. "That'll be sufficient." But I was talking about my father. My father is buried far from the church he attended in the many years that he was married, 6. The years seem not so many now. 6 years married, 25 years now dead. Dead at 37 of an accident, a car accident, they said, drowning, a morning storm, caught so many cars on their way to work, they said. Besides, they said, he was a bad driver. They said, read the papers from the time. His name is there. A mean rain runneled over blinded cars, stalled along the highway on the day my father died. Spring. He took the old road that ran along the lake and somehow, was it slick or fog, slipped off the road and onto the lake where the rain-pocked ice gave way on a breath, and down went the car and its drivers. Minutes was all it took. 8, 9, 10, my guess. 10, my age, when age began to matter, and Mother's terrible Walter said, you look good enough to eat. And he licked his lips at me and farted. But my father. Sometimes it is not the lake, but a river that feeds into the lake that drowns him. There is no briefcase in the river, no falling through peated water. When my father drowns in the river, he is naked. The water carries his body fast. My father has no body, no spittled lips, no smells, fished out of the lake or out of the river. My father is washed, featureless, sodden, and dark. I have to fight the impulse to kick him. You, I frown, a girl, disgusted. Why is it always you I am thinking of? My head is on fire like this sometimes. And this last is, again, for the English teacher. Because I could not stop for death. More than any other, you belong here. But what is there to say but what I meant to say and never did? Not quite, and perhaps not even here, and yet I write to you and see your same uneven hand, me older now than you when first we met, my teacher, the oddest looking man. Everyone said so. You were, what, in your 30s? And worked up every day, spitting into the gullies of books and more books. They've made movies out of you, but the heroes have been handsome, hardly you. Impossible list of imperfections, no chin, moist, petulant lips. Nora Gale Bryant said you touched her breasts in the cattle-stunned heat of a summer when she was learning words, ambiguous, augment, assess. To be the first one in her family to get away from where we all got away from, all but you. Come late enough by choice to the new school where nothing was decided and the unslanted wood and the rain flared yellow. You stayed, a pioneer, intrepid. Nora Gale said you, we couldn't ever quite believe it. A little teepee of a man, white lashes, goggly eyes. How could you? I always meant to ask. Besides, you had a wife then, though for years we did not see that faint-colored woman with a paintbrush at her ear. We were looking at you in the middle of the horseshoed tables, waving at us papers with messages in red, words extravagant or cruel. We could see the grades you said you forgot as soon as entered there. Only the student marked upon remembers. I am at the end of the horseshoed table nearest to the board and to you and to where it is you turn to write in your upslant hand. How much has been said. We are writing poems, and even before the day is out, you are calling to me. Yes, you headlonging down the hall after me with the news. You like it, yes. In school, such things can happen as change a life. You failed me for what I failed to write on Auden's poems, saying, oh, all right, so what, impromptu. Your expression as you spoke to me was bewildered, you retreating to your Shakespeare. You reason as a woman. I think him so because I think him so. You, a teacher, after all, leaning against the blackboard, fanny chalked. You yelled, "Defend yourself!" Names, titles, your readiness to speak made me clumsy, and I resented you and everyone else, pointing, look at what they do in my house. I'm thinking a morning newspaper, odd magazines only to mother. Do the books collect like string? All kinds. She isn't choosy. Hardbacks on the high shelves, but paperbacks mostly, bookmarked with her bobby pins or broken and swollen in the places she thinks to leave them. I read them. I read a lot. Mostly poets, men poets, not handsome in their photographs, but glistening to please. A sweaty, open-collared pose, an appearance almost anxious, a little mad and full of yearning, a little, should I say it, like you. So country alone and oh, so very friendly. You quoted someone forever old and unloved. Of course, love, you said, when I was no longer your student. What else but love and God and dying, you asked. By then, only drinking coffee, you sometimes trembled just to speak, and yet I made our dates in bars and pulled olives off toothpicks with my teeth. Conspicuously buckled links, chains, I tunneled my hand through the gap in my shirt. You told me what you wanted, but I, who had given in to so many with no regard to after, guarded my sweet sex. We met in places far enough away from where you taught, kept a wife, slushed through the streets after rice, milk, salt. Besides that life, shelves of soups and chipped plates and umbrellas crimping in the closet heat was not real, no more than were the children, yours and mine. Boy or girl, you had to ask and ask, but so did I. Rousingly disillusioning was how you said it had been for a lot of us, and you sent me your poems where the vaulted classroom flickered warm wood red. Your sentiment surprised me. Besides, it was not like that. The ceiling was low and perforated, I remember, and the classroom's plastic surfaces, slouchy modern seats and rounded edges, table legs like cue sticks, hollow tubes of aluminum. I could lock my legs around them, writing furiously on whichever Conrad it was in the years I had you. You were interested in islands, you said, the sea, your mother. I sat through our dates thinking of that classroom and of us here in the middle of the country, no ocean in sight, dry, level, treeless expanse, the same we looked out on and out on from wherever you were staying then. Getting well, you said, getting better than ever. Coffee, coffee, coffee. You were warming your hands on the mitt of your cup, sniffing at the vapors, palely seen. You, sick this way. I could and could not believe it. Really? I said to every disclosure. I'm amazed. I didn't know. Didn't want to know. Your hands were very pale. Your fingernails were yellow. It was easy to resist you, to say no to you when you asked if you might. I did not treat you well. I never told you, turned away in the moment when it happened, you shutting your mouth on the tablet of her words, Dickinson, the flood subject, death. Was he expected? Were you in any way prepared? The students gathered at your desk said you were teaching or had finished teaching the famous poem when it happened, but I am not acquainted with these students and cannot ask what it was they heard, children still. Yet every year I greet them, as you did on your great lawn, versions of the same faces. I begin to know how old you were. Death apparent everywhere. And you, dying too soon for us to talk about it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.